Door's open. Come on in.
Hi, Bill. Have you got a minute?
Sure, Dave. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been assigned to put together one of these training sessions we're giving the AMTs in the region. I don't quite know how to go about it. Ted tells me you've got some experience in the area, and I was wondering if you could give me some pointers.
Sure, no problem. Why don't we meet in the conference room, say, around 1 o'clock? That'll give me some time to put some ideas together.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, see you then.
Okay, Dave. There are 2 major activities you need to consider when you're putting your training session together. First, you have to decide what you're going to say and the best way to say it. That's the training development phase. Then, you have to work on your presentation technique and materials to make sure people are listening to you when you're giving your training session and absorbing what you have to say. Let's start with the training development phase. An overview of the process will help you in putting together one of these training sessions, or in fact, any training session. First, you need to solidify the idea of what you want to train. Then you need to decide if you can get your points across by simply telling the audience, or will you have to actually teach them? Then you'll need to develop training objectives. What do you expect the audience to be able to do at the end of the training? And how will they be able to show you that they can do it? You'll also need to do some background research on your audience so you can tailor the training specifically to them. Find out what kind of resources are available from your office to put on this training session. Now, you start developing the content, deciding what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. When you've put the training session together, you'll want to check it out with some of the other people around the office to see if it looks good to them also. Well, finally, you'll want to try out your session on a small audience to get their feedback on how it works and how to get in some practice for yourself.
Yeah, practice session. That's good.
A good training session starts with a clear statement of the purpose of the training. Let your audience know exactly what is the knowledge or skill that you want them to have after you've made your presentation. The training idea you come up with expresses this purpose. So write your idea down and keep it short. You should come back to your idea from time to time as you're putting your session together to make sure you're staying on track and achieving your purpose. Here's an example of when I put together a training session on airworthiness. The idea states the problem: airworthiness violations occurring due to lack of knowledge, how the current system is deficient in addressing this problem. Training provides only a cursory overview of regs and how the training program being put together will overcome this problem. A training program is required which imparts information and resources. Well, next, you decide whether you'll need to instruct or inform.
Instruct or inform? What's the difference?
I have an idea. Let's go to the training room. Informing involves just standing in front of the audience and stating what you have to tell them. It's very much a one-way exchange from you to the audience. Instructing has the audience getting involved in the training session by answering questions, offering ideas, or participating in problems.
Oh, I think I get it. It's kind of like talking to them versus talking with them.
Right. Participation is the key. For most training sessions, you'll want to use instruction because you have detailed knowledge or skills you want the audience to be able to remember or carry out. By having the audience actively participating, it'll be easier for the audience to absorb what you're saying, and you'll also have a way to make sure that they have by having them provide feedback through their ideas and their responses to your questions. Okay, Dave, once you have your idea written down, you need to develop it into training objectives. Your idea is a statement of what you want to teach. Training objectives are statements of what you want the audience to know or be able to do after they've gone through the training session, to prove that they have properly learned what you've taught them. State your objectives as actions the audience can demonstrate to you, either in the form of correctly stated ideas, answers to questions you ask them, participation in work groups, or other similar activities. A well-written training objective will contain the following. First, a statement of what the student is to know and how the student is to demonstrate this knowledge. Second, the conditions under which the student will demonstrate their performance, where, when, how, for how long, and using what tools. And third, a statement of how well the student has to perform. For example, the student may have a maximum number of errors to make, or may have to do a task in a certain amount of time. This is an example of a training objective that might be stated for an aviation maintenance technician. Notice that the objectives state what the student must be able to do, the conditions for the demonstration, and the required level of performance.
That's pretty clear cut.
Okay, good. The next step is to find out what training resources are available, affordable, and realistic. Although an elaborate audio-visual presentation may look professional and really get your point across, it's not realistic to design this sort of training session if your office can't afford to support it. The things you need to find out are, first, what equipment is available. Second, what facilities are available, the kind and size of room, even check out the furnishings. And third, how much money is there for supplies? Once you've determined what support you can expect, you'll need to tailor your training session to these resources. But first and foremost, develop training that the audience will find interesting, useful, and perhaps entertaining. To develop a training session the trainees will appreciate, gather some background information on the expected audience. I've jotted down some of the things to consider. What's the age group of your audience? What's their motivation for taking your training session? Or why are they coming? Why are they interested in what you have to say? The audience will be satisfied with your training session if you meet these expectations. What background knowledge, experience, and education level does the audience have? It's important to determine this. Now, if your training session is put together assuming the audience knows certain things and they don't, then you may lose them and they won't get your point and may even stop paying attention. If you tell them things that they already know, you'll bore them and again they'll stop paying attention. This is an example of an audience survey for our airworthiness course. Gear your presentation to the type of audience you'll have. If people attend because it's mandated and they aren't really interested in the material, you'll need to put a lot more thought into making the session interesting and showing the value of the training to them. Now, if people attend out of genuine interest and a desire for personal development, then your task is that much easier. Furthermore, depending on what your audience knows, you may have to put more or less background information and detail into your session. If the audience needs background information and presenting it during the training session would take up valuable time, try to distribute reading material in advance to the participants.
That way I can spend more time on the important stuff.
Right. Now with the background work done, you can start putting together the training material, what you're going to say and show. There are 3 related steps you'll need to carry out when you're doing this. You'll need to decide what teaching techniques you're going to use to get your point across in the best manner. You'll also need to decide what presentation equipment is best suited to the material you want to present. When you've made these decisions, you'll then be ready to script your presentation so that it incorporates the teaching techniques you've chosen and is suited to the selected presentation equipment. Let's focus on 3 teaching techniques. The first, participation and practice, requires asking questions, soliciting opinions, having exercises generally involving the audience. The second, redundancy, has you repeating important points and distributing copies of the presented material, anything that enhances remembering. The third, presentation rate, focuses on the speed of your voice. Don't speak so slowly that you bore the audience. Likewise, too fast might not give people the chance to think about what you're saying. Now, in terms of the presentation as a whole, you need to carefully consider what type of knowledge and skills you're trying to pass along to the audience. These can be separated into 4 main categories: facts, concepts, principles and rules, and problem solving. These categories are ordered from top to bottom in terms of complexity and difficulty to learn. Facts are fairly straightforward to get across to the audience. Concepts, however, will most likely require examples to illustrate the point in question. When teaching such things as principles and rules and problem-solving skills, workshops and exercises are normally required to allow the audience to practice using these new skills. Well, as the material becomes more difficult to learn, you'll have to provide more examples and require more audience participation.
Okay, Bill, got it. So now I put together my presentation material, right?
Whoa, not yet. There are still some other teaching techniques you may need to consider when developing the content of your training session. First and most important, motivate your audience. You have established the characteristics of the audience. Now you need to make your presentation interesting and entertaining and perceived as useful. Second, make the training relevant. This helps keep up the motivation level. It means that you need to pass on knowledge and skills that will be useful in the everyday activities of the audience. If the audience can see that the information relates to their daily activities, then they can see how to immediately apply, practice, and improve the learned skills. Organize your presentation so that it flows logically. For example, arrange information by topic and work from the general level to the specific level. Develop your training session so that the skills and knowledge you're passing on will transfer directly to the daily activities of the audience. The more you can make your audience activities the same as those carried out on the job, the easier it will be for them to use their newfound knowledge and skills. Show actual forms, tools, and techniques when possible. Also, using realistic exercises greatly aids this transfer to the workplace. Use redundancy. Use redundancy. Use redundancy. For example, repeat important points. Show as well as explain things, and hand out paper copies of your presentation material. All these things will help the audience learn and remember.
I get it. I get it. I get it.
And remember, practice your presentation rate. Don't speak so slow as to bore the audience. On the other hand, don't present so fast that the audience doesn't have time to think about what you're saying. Finally, regularly get feedback from your audience. Don't wait for them to ask questions. For example, ask direct questions of the class or give a snap quiz on specific points. Make it fun, but be insistent on this point. This technique keeps them alert, involved, and is a good barometer for you. If you think back to training objectives, you need to get feedback so that the audience can demonstrate that they have learned what you taught them. By looking at this model of how information is passed from a presenter to an audience, you can see why it is necessary for the audience to demonstrate to you what they've learned. First, the presenter has an idea or concept that needs to be conveyed to the audience. The presenter then incorporates it into the presentation material as best he can. If the presenter has properly applied the necessary teaching techniques, he will have probably done a very good job. The material is presented to the audience by way of presentation equipment. This can be done in the form of overhead slides or any range of visual or auditory aids. The audience then receives the message by either seeing or hearing the information, or both. The audience then decides what was meant by the information they were just given. As you can see, the information gets transferred many times, and the intent of the message, as well as some of the meaning, can get lost in the translation. To ensure the audience understood what you meant, you need to have them tell you what they thought you meant. This is part of the feedback technique I mentioned, asking questions. This will make sure that your objective has been achieved. Some of the information being presented may be lost if the audience is distracted. This can occur if they're bored, daydreaming, or simply looking at something else in the room. It's important that you keep the audience focused on what you're trying to tell or show them. Let's discuss techniques for doing this.
Wait, you mentioned equipment several times. I'd like to go into that first.
Okay, fine. Make sure the equipment is appropriate to the material, that it's best suited to getting the message across, and that it's affordable. For example, if you're trying to describe an engine component, it would obviously be better to present a picture or schematic of the part, rather than trying to describe the component in words using text. In this case, the adage, "one picture is worth 1,000 words," definitely holds true. Now, another example might be to verbally describe a sound. Ever try it, Dave? Obviously, playing an audio clip is the best method. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of some of the more common presentation devices. Photos or pictures are good for providing visual information. Many of the pictures you need will be readily available in books, so no production expense will be required, and no equipment is necessary to show the pictures. Well, one problem with using a photograph is that it must be large enough to be seen by the entire audience. This makes it inconvenient to carry around, and enlargements of photographs can be quite expensive. Finally, still pictures are static. They don't move. For a discussion of a procedure or process, it will probably be better to use video where motion can be shown, rather than a series of still photos. Chalkboards are an inexpensive way of presenting written material, or for drawing rudimentary sketches. The quality of the information depends on the handwriting and drawing ability of the presenter. Unfortunately, only one board full of information can be presented at one time. For additional information, the board must be erased and new information put on it. This requires you to turn your back to the audience, taking the time to erase the old information and write the new. Chalkboards are best suited for presenting important points that come up during the training session. The same pros and cons apply to flip charts, with a few additions. More information can be prepared ahead of time. They can be prepared in the presenter's office and transported to the training site. However, flip charts may be difficult to transport. Flip charts are not very large, which either limits the size of the audience or the amount of information that can be presented. Finally, it can be difficult to flip backwards through the charts to find the one page you want to emphasize a point. And using a flip chart means having to write or print clearly.
And at the correct size to be seen all the way in the back of the room.
Slide projectors are suited to photos, graphics, and written material. Because they are projected, the size of the display can be adjusted to suit the audience. Now, it's easy to move from slide to slide, both forward and backward, especially if you use a remote control. The slides can be kept permanently in the same order if you desire. The disadvantages of slides is that, like photographs, they're static. You can only highlight information when originally producing the slides or by using a light pointer during the presentation. Obviously, you can't add information to a slide once produced. This can hamper you during an interesting discussion when additional thoughts become important to convey. Finally, depending on the power of the projector, the room lighting may have to be dimmed, which affects your ability to interact with your audience. The overhead projector is perhaps the most commonly used presentation method today. Overhead slides are cheap, they can be prepared ahead of time, and they're very portable. Overhead slides can be used for written and graphic material. And important points on the slide can be highlighted with the presenter facing the audience. Well, obviously, one good way to use overheads is with a blank overhead sheet and a wax pencil to write or emphasize a point. As with slides, projection size can be modified to suit the audience. They're less cumbersome to flip back and forth than flip charts. Again, a disadvantage is that slides are static. Also, depending on the stand that is used for the projector, the image can be distorted, an effect commonly referred to as keystoning. The big advantage of television and videotape is that they have movement and sound. As we discussed, these features may greatly enhance the effectiveness of your presentation when teaching such things as processes, procedures, or troubleshooting techniques, activities which involve a sequence of events. The drawback to television and videotape is that they're generally not suited to large audiences unless expensive projection equipment is used. Also, since it's not possible to modify or add to the video, they must be carefully selected and prepared and incorporated effectively into the rest of the training session. Remember, Dave, use redundancy. Computer-based multimedia presentation devices combine the best of all worlds, but they're fairly new and very expensive to purchase. They're basically computer-generated overhead slides. However, audio and video clips can be made part of the overhead slides. The big advantage of television and videotape is that they have movement and sound. The overhead slides can be flipped through with ease. They can be highlighted, and professional quality slides can be inserted during the presentation, with the presenter facing the audience. Handouts should serve to reinforce your presentation and provide additional knowledge your audience will find useful. Make them attractive in appearance and easily understood. Remember that they'll later serve as a reference for reinforcement of your most important points. Oh, and remember this, distribute them only when needed. Papers being passed around a room can be distracting, and participants often begin reading them as soon as they get them, often missing the statements you're making at the same time. Okay, Dave, we've looked at equipment. Let's go back to presenting in a little more detail. Once you've completed a draft of your presentation, you'll want to assure yourself that what you've put together will achieve its intended purpose. You should show the presentation to your coworkers or other people who may have an interest in the training you're planning to give and solicit their opinions. This will also give you practice on getting audience feedback. Some of the things you'll want to have them comment on are: 1. Whether the training is properly geared toward the intended audience. 2. Whether the content is accurate, complete, and up to date. 3. Whether the training flows smoothly. 4. Whether the points you are making are getting across properly. 5. Whether anything should be added or removed from the training session. After you have used the results of this review to update your training program, give the training session a trial run on a small audience. Use people from the group of people you will eventually be training. As you are delivering the presentation, have the audience comment on the handouts you have provided and all other parts of the presentation. Here are some sample questions you may want to use. 1. Are there any difficulties in understanding the material? 2. Is the material presented in the proper sequence and at the proper pace? 3. Was the material boring or interesting? 4. Was the training either too long or too short? 5. Was the training either too hard or too easy? 6. Were the audio visuals useful or were they distracting? Would other visuals have been more appropriate? 7. Were the presentation devices used appropriate to the material? 8. What was your favorite and least favorite part of the training session and why? 9. What changes do you think should be incorporated into the training program?
Gosh, Bill, that's a lot to think about.
Sure, Dave, but once you've used this final review to polish your training program, you'll be ready to proceed with your actual training sessions. If you follow these steps, you can be fairly sure that you've put together an effective training program. So, Dave, did I answer your questions and give you enough information to get started?
You bet. Thanks, Bill. This has been very helpful. As I get into this, though, I might have another question or two. I might need a few other pointers.
I'll tell you what. Follow the steps I covered and put your training program together. Then stop by, and I'll go over specific presentation techniques that you can apply to your program. What you have here looks good, but a good training program is only half the battle. You also have to present your material effectively to ensure what you have to say is absorbed by your participants. You need to use a presentation style and a variety of techniques that will keep the audience locked in on what you have to say and focused on the material. One of the most important aspects of delivering training is ensuring that your presentation materials can be seen. This is especially important for written material. How well something can be seen depends on an attribute called subtended visual angle. Now, don't worry about the term. It basically means that the farther away something is, the larger it has to be seen.
Yeah, but that's pretty basic.
It is, but it can get complicated. For presentations, text should generally subtend 14 to 24 minutes of visual angle. This chart is an easy way of ensuring you meet this requirement. It specifies how large the letters in your text should be, based on how far away your audience is from the display. For example, if someone is sitting 10 feet away, the size of the lettering should be between 1 and 1.5 inches high. However, one twist is that the minimum text heights for some distances are larger than the maximum heights for shorter distances.
Whoa, now you lost me.
Here, let me show you an example. This slide was made the minimum height, 2.9 inches, for a viewing distance of 30 feet. So let's check it out at 30 feet. But let's move up to 15 feet. The text now looks too large and exceeds the maximum height, 2.5 inches, called for in the chart. The solution is to design your text for the average distance your audience members will be from your presentation, and try to arrange your audience so they're able to read the text from wherever they are in the room. Make sure the arrangements are comfortable as well.
I get it now.
Good. With slides and overheads, you can sometimes adjust the height of the text when you're setting up the equipment. But bear in mind that with paper-based presentations, such as flip charts, you must figure out beforehand what height to use. No matter what presentation equipment or materials you use, try to get early access to the room in which you'll be presenting, so you can determine the height requirements and seating ahead of time.
Like you said, this can get complicated.
Just relax. You'll be using techniques like subtended visual angle to prepare materials with no audience around, and you'll have time so you can fix up your presentation by yourself or with a few friends until you get it really good. If you can't control the seating arrangements, make sure the text can be seen from the back row. Although the text may be too large for the front row, at least the back row audience won't be struggling to see your material. If you can arrange your audience, follow these general principles for all devices, but not a television monitor. Seat the closest row no closer than 2 widths of the display from the display, and seat the last row no farther than 6 widths.
Okay, I've got that. But what about TV?
Well, seat the audience in a quarter circle area. For a 20 to 30 inch television, the audience should sit between 7 and 23 feet from the screen. Now again, any text displayed on the television needs to be set to a proper height. Place the television high enough that everyone gets an unobstructed view, but not so high that anyone has to look up more than 30 degrees from the horizontal. Look, what we've been going over here are the best things to do and the best ways to go. You may not always get the perfect place and time to teach, so just relax and go with the best that you can do. Hey, it'll probably be better than a lot of the training your audience may have had in the past. Before giving the presentation, there are still a few additional steps to consider.
More?
Just a few, and all important. First, you need to prepare the room. Aside from arranging the seats to ensure everyone can see, you need to adjust the ventilation and lighting so that the environment is comfortable. Second, Set up your presentation materials and devices and make sure they're functioning properly. Walk around the room to ensure your presentation can indeed be seen by all audience members. And third, you need to prepare yourself. Rehearse your presentation. Get used to standing at the front of the room and do whatever will make you calm and confident.
When you start your presentation, prepare your audience. Sort of warm them up like TV talk show hosts do. Relaxed, conversational. Make them feel at ease with an anecdote or a joke. It sets them and you at ease. Here's a few points. Give them an overview of what you are going to talk with them about. Be sure to include what benefit they will derive from the time spent with you. When speaking, be yourself. Stand comfortably and speak as you would normally speak, but loud enough for the audience to hear. Avoid nervous and distracting mannerisms like smoothing your hair, twisting your watch, or clicking your pen. Use strong body positions and movements. Position yourself so that the audience will pay the most attention to you or your presentation materials, depending on which you want.
Do you mean that there are some places to stand that are better than others?
Definitely. The areas where the audience will be focusing attention are the center and the front. The area of the stage that will get the most attention is the front center, followed by the rear center, followed by the right front and the left front. Now the right and left rear get the least attention. If you want the audience to pay attention to your audio visuals because the important material is visual and your voice is just providing a highlight, position the audio visuals in the attention-getting area. That would be center front or rear. Position yourself to the side and, if possible, to the rear of the audio visual. Now, if you want to be the center of attention because the presentation material only highlights what you're saying, put the audio visual to the left or right of the stage, and preferably behind you. Position yourself front and center. Now, to keep the attention of the audience, face them straight on as much as possible. If you must turn away, try only to turn sideways. If you turn your back on the audience, you'll probably lose their attention. If you want to emphasize a point, move to the front center of the stage. This will focus audience attention on you, with particular emphasis on the content of your remarks.
And do you have any tips on the visual aids I'll use?
You read my mind.
If a photograph or graphic is your visual medium, be sure it's large enough to be seen by those in the back row. Place the picture on a stand to avoid shaking, moving, or worse, dropping it. Limit the number of pictures you use. You don't want to overwhelm or bore your audience. Showing more than one picture at a time might have the audience focused on the wrong one. Show the pictures one at a time, except when you need to do comparisons. When finished, cover the photo and use specific questions about the material to ensure the audience got the message. Go back over some of the photos if you think the point was missed.
If you decide to use a chalk or whiteboard as your presentation method, prepare it ahead of time, or if things come up during a session that you want to talk about, write them during a break period. Remember, don't go too far away from your prepared material. Keep your focus.
Writing on the board during your session makes you turn your back to the audience, and as demonstrated, may cause your audience to stop paying attention. If you decide to write a point raised during your presentation for emphasis, make it brief. And don't try to speak to the audience while writing. Finish writing first, then turn and face the audience to speak.
Print neatly. As a rule of thumb, to ensure text can be seen by the entire audience, use 2 to 3 inch letters. And use color only for emphasis and limit the number of colors you use. The same rules for chalkboards apply to flip charts. In addition, use high contrast markers that will not bleed through the paper.
Ensure the chart is secure in its mounting. Having the chart fall is not only distracting, it's also embarrassing. Try to make your points sequentially and not flip backwards through the charts. When using overhead projectors, do not try to add material to the transparency during your presentation. Writing on the transparency can be very distracting. Underlining and other techniques are effective, but if you have more points to make, use the chalkboard or a flip chart. Switch off the projector between transparencies. Leaving it on between slides will keep the audience attention on the slide, rather than shifting their attention to you and the point you're trying to make. Use windows and overlays to reveal your points when you want them. Otherwise, the audience may read ahead of you, stop listening, or misinterpret what's on the transparency. If you use a pointer, lay the pointer on the transparency so your hand doesn't shake.
Okay, what about using 35mm slides?
When using slides, plan and rehearse the narration of the slide presentation ahead of time. Ensure the slides are in the right order and right side up. If available, use a remote control. This allows you to face your audience and gives you freedom of movement. You can position yourself for effect and ensure audience attention. Begin and end with a blank slide so that the audience is not hit with a bright glare at either end of the presentation. Some projectors automatically go black between slides. Check the one you're using. Again, turn off the slide projector when you're not using it so the audience attention shifts from the projector to you and your message. When using television or video, check the lighting, seating, and volume ahead of time so that you're sure the entire audience will see and hear the presentation. Tell your audience what they're about to see before starting the video. Tell them the significance of the content. Following the presentation, summarize what has been shown and its significance for the audience.
And that's it. Think you got it all?
I think so.
Come on, pal. I'll buy you a Coke. Dave, just remember, develop a training program taking into consideration the type of audience and knowledge and skills you want to impart to them. Review the various teaching techniques. Select the appropriate presentation equipment and visual aids. And consider the classroom and adjust the seating arrangements and environment. Also, practice your presentation method and get feedback. And then, go for it.
I just wanted to say thanks again. It went great, really easier than I thought.
Yeah, Sally attended and said you were a great success. Congratulations. You can see now all your preparation really paid off.
Couldn't have done it without your help, Bill.
You're welcome, Teach. Oh, by the way, here's your diploma. You need to adjust the ventilation and lighting. And this is lighting, and this is ventilation. And you know what, Steve? That's the last one. So I don't know what we do now. We just... I got the...
Okay, we're going to do this one more time. Boo, you have to look really embarrassed.
I'm not already.
Not proud. You look real happy with yourself.
I shouldn't be doing this with the camera rolling, man. This is not good.